Chris Parody here. Today I'm going to teach you to play the old-time fiddle tune Angeline the Baker for fingerstyle guitar, and I'm going to teach you to play it in a nice, simple, straightforward way, and then I'm also going to show you some ways that you can vary it and do some micro improvisation with it over time so that it'll stay nice and fresh and can be a piece that is ever evolving in your playing. We're going to start and we're going to play the melody really straightforward in this first A section. As we do the second A section, as we're repeating A, we're going to start to add in some variation and embellishment and talk about how we can do that and toy with that throughout the piece. We're going to do the same approach to the B section. So you probably already know this, but a lot of these old-timey fiddle songs have a similar structure. The A section played twice. Each time is 8 measures, so by the time we've played the A section twice, we've played 16 measures. Same thing with the B section, so basically by the time we've played the whole tune, we've played 32 measures. So we're going to play the first 8, again, really straightforward and simple, and the next 8 we'll add a little bit too. So as we play that first measure, we're going to start off, and the first 3 beats are all going to be pinches. The fourth beat, we're going to play just the thumb by itself, and on the and, we're going to play an 8th note. So fretting wise there, I'm starting with my index finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, kind of operating out of a D chord shape, but really that finger is the only one that I need on to begin, because I'm going to pinch the 6th and the 3rd string, and then the 4th and the 2nd both open. Then my ring finger is going to fret the 3rd fret of the B string on that 3rd bass note as I pinch again. So I'm kind of building gradually into my D chord. I'm not going to need that middle finger note for quite a while. That'll come a little bit later in the song. So there are the first 3 beats. On the 4th beat, we're going to play the thumb on string 4, and then on the and, we're going to play the 2nd fret of G again. So measure 1 would sound like this. Now we could make that even simpler and more straightforward. It could just be a pinch every time, like that. I find that sounds almost too straightforward. It's nice to have that little offset 8th note at the end as it takes us into the 2nd measure. So let's play that 2nd measure and then maybe just listen back to those 2 possibilities there. Really straightforward and just that 1 note pushed into the and slot to add a little syncopation. So the 2nd measure, we're going to lift that ring finger back off the 2nd string to open it up, and that's going to allow us to pinch string 6 and 2 on the first beat of measure 2. We're going to put that ring finger back down for the 2nd beat. Our thumb drops to string 4, alternating down in the bass, and then we just finish that measure off with 2 solo bass notes. So the 2nd measure is pretty simple, and it's going to sound like that. So again, if we play those first 2 measures really straightforward and we just pinched every single time there was a melody note, it would sound like that. A subtle difference if we just push that 4th melody note of measure 1 into the and of 4, it sounds like that. So just a little bit more rhythmically interesting, and we're going to add a lot more rhythmic interest later on, but that's just something to consider. You could actually play it even simpler than I have it in the tab. That's another possible variation. So each little idea of how we might play the piece is a variation that you can add in. So we'll see a lot of this as we go further on. Every time there's a little thing you can tweak. Well, the first time through you could play it one way, the next time through you could play it a different way, and in that way it'll keep the piece really fresh and really alive as you play through it. So it is worth, I think, as straightforward as it sounds to play it that way. Again, that gives us a possible variation. So worth pointing that out, I think, just to give us another way we could play it. Okay, as we come into the 3rd measure, we're going to start with the same 3 beats that we played in measure 1. Only the 4th beat changes, and the bass stays the same. We alternate down to string 4, and we're going to pinch that with the 1st string open. So measure 3 would sound like this. All right, now in measure 4, we get to a G chord for the first time in the song. Our thumb is still going to be alternating from string 6 to string 4. This time though, we're fretting the 5th fret of the low E string with our ring finger, which is always a sign in drop D tuning that we're playing some sort of G chord voicing, because with that D string tuned down, that means we have D, E, F, so G is all the way up on the 5th fret there. So once we have that bass note in place for the G chord, the first beat is going to have us pinch strings 6, 3, and 2, and then we're just going to play the bass for the rest of that measure. So we have a nice long melody note there. Technically, all we have to really play there is just strings 6 and 2, our bass note and our upper voice, that's the melody. That 3rd string note is just a nice little middle voice that can kind of make that chord sound even bigger when we hit it, especially since we're going to, in this instance, just let the chord ring, let that melody note ring out over the whole measure. So now we have measures 1 through 4. Sound like that. And as we come into measure 5 is really similar to what we played in measure 3. There's just a subtle change on the 4th beat. So what's going to happen is we start with those same 3 beats, also what we played as the first 3 beats of measure 1. But unlike measure 3, where we pinched string 4 and 1, this time what we're going to do is we're going to play string 4 with the thumb by itself, and then on the and of 4, we're going to play the open high E string. So measure 5 would sound like that. Okay, now for the first time, our middle finger is going to come to fret the 2nd fret of the high E string. It's going to complete that D chord shape, but it's only going to be there for a moment. We're going to pinch string 6 and 1, immediately lift that finger off to play the open high E string again. Drop our thumb to string 4. On the and of that beat, we're going to play that 3rd fret of the B string, followed by 2 bass notes. Okay, now we're going to kind of echo that same thing that we played at the end of measure 5 into measure 6, and that's going to happen here, this little echo, as we go from measure 6 into measure 7. We're going to play that open high E string on the and of 4, and then we're going to fret that 2nd fret again on the high E as we pinch the 6th and the 1st string, high E on the and of 1, so that would be thumb drops down. Then we have a little change after that. Let's just back up to the start of measure 5 so that we can have a chance to practice measure 5, measure 6, and the first half of measure 7. Okay, one more time, nice and slow without me narrating. Okay, so that leaves us halfway through measure 7, and in the second half of measure 7 we're going to go back to that G chord, so we'll fret the 5th fret of the 6th string with our ring finger again, but this time we're going to play as well the 3rd fret of the B string with our index finger, so that's going to give us strings 6 and 2, and we're fretting the 5th and the 3rd fret. We're going to pinch those together, then we're going to play the open B on the and of that beat. Our thumb will then drop down and play the final bass note of that measure, the open 4th string, which takes us to measure 8. We're going to fret that 2nd fret of G again. We're going to pinch that with string 6 in the bass, and we're just going to alternate out the rest of that. Okay, that gives us the A section the first time through. Let's hear the whole thing. Alright, so just 2 subtle details that I would remind us of again that occurred in that part was measure 1, we could play all 4 beats as pinches, or as we see in the tab, we could just push that 4th melody note into the and slot of that 4th beat to give us a slightly different rhythmic delivery of that measure. The other detail I would point out is, as I mentioned on that G chord in measure 4, I like to use all 3 fingers there. And then by the time the thumb drops down into the 2nd beat, we've sounded this big G chord there. But you don't have to. You could just play sometimes just a pinch. get a little bit of a more subdued sound, less ringing, just those 2 notes rather than 3. And then you can bass out the rest of that measure. So a couple really minor but also effective variations you could consider already on that part. But now as we come into the second A section, we're going to see a lot more potential for how we could vary things. And as I mentioned before, each time we change something here, just think of it as another potential option when you get to that measure. One thing that's great about especially these old-timey fiddle tunes, although it's true of many other styles of music as well, is we can really massage melodies and move things around and even change the actual note sequences of melodies and still stay true to the tune. So try to avoid feeling when you're learning something like there's only one way of playing the melody. Instead, think that the melody is something that's pretty fluid and you can actually do quite a lot differently with it and still be true to the melody, still get the tune across to the listener. And that's probably the biggest thing you want to ask yourself when you're doing this sort of stuff is, can I still hear the tune myself? If you can, then probably the listener can as well. So we don't want to stray too far from the melody, but at the same time, we can really play with it. We can be playful and experimental and take it a lot of different directions. So the first measure of our second A section, measure 9, is actually just going to repeat what we did earlier. But as we get to measure 10, we're going to do something similar that we did already, actually. That last beat of the previous measure, measure 9, which is also measure 1, we did that little offset melody note where we put it in the and slot. And we're going to do the same thing. Whereas in the second measure we went like this, we pinched and then we pinched for those 2 melody notes. This time what we're going to do is we're going to take that second melody note that was happening on beat 2 of measure 2, we're going to push it into the and slot of the first beat here. So instead of going as we did before, this time we're going to go play the melody note and then have our thumb drop. And that's going to give us this now from measure 9. That'd basically be the first half of measure 10 that I just played there. Picking up in that second half of measure 10, we just play our next 2 bass notes. And then we're going to play that second fret of the G string on the and of 4, which if you compare measure 11 to measure 3, you'll see we're doing the same thing here. Again, we're just moving that note a little bit early. That melody note's just happening a half a beat early in the and slot rather than on the downbeat of the next measure. So now we're going to get this if we play from measure 9 through measure 11. Okay, I added a little bit there that we haven't gone over yet. So let's break down that second part of measure 11. You can see that the second beat, that stays exactly the same as it did in measure 3. We just pinch string 4 and 2 open. The third beat stays the same as well. We play string 6 and 2. We fret that third fret of the second string. But then on the and of that beat, we're going to play the open high E string. So once again, we're taking that next melody note and we're just making it happen a little early. And then our thumb comes down and plays string 4. Okay, let's hear the difference. Let's play measures 1, 2, 3 and compare them to how we now are playing measures 9, 10, and 11. So here's measures 1, 2, and 3 again. Okay, here's measures 9, 10, and 11. So a little bit more rhythmically interesting by basically taking some notes, moving them a half beat earlier, putting them into the and beat rather than on the numbered beat. So that's a simple and effective rhythmic variation that you can do on this tune and on a lot of tunes. Is if you're playing things on the numbered beats 1, 2, 3, 4, experiment with taking a melody note and just moving it a half beat earlier into the and of the previous beat. And that's something that you could try elsewhere in this tune. There's plenty of places where I didn't do that, where it might sound really good as well, and it might have another nice, interesting rhythmic wrinkle to add to the song. Just like I said earlier, you're the ultimate judge of if it works or not. And I would even encourage you to sometimes think about that it might not work necessarily in a really straight ahead way, but sometimes maybe you want to actually make the tune sound especially weird in certain places, and that can be its own variation. We might not want to do it for the whole tune, but I do encourage just kind of wild experimentation sometimes, taking an idea to a total extreme and then maybe just kind of, stripping it back a little bit if it feels like it's too much. The more we do something, the less interesting it gets. Whereas if we just kind of sprinkle these ideas in from time to time, I think that's where they really work the best, is having a little bit of contrast, a little bit of back and forth. Okay, as you get to measure 12, we're going to be back on that G chord, and we're going to start exactly the same as we did earlier, except this time we're going to play it like this. Really simple. We've done some things in previous songs like this. I often just call this rhythmic filler, because as we saw when we first came to this measure in measure 4, that time we just played the melody and then we just let the bass do the rest of the talking in that measure, because the melody can just last for all 4 beats. Here what we did though is we played that, and then we played 4, 3, 6, 2, 4. So we're just adding in some extra echoes of that G chord basically, and there's a ton of different things you could do. So I chose, for instance, to do the and of 2 and to play the 3rd string there, the and of 3 and to play the 2nd string there. If I took that to an extreme, I could have done every single and beat of that measure as a rhythmic filler note. So for instance, I could go like that, or I could change what strings I'm doing. And that could be another potential variation. We could also, for instance, if we fret this 3rd fret of the high E string, we could use that note as part of our potential for the rhythmic filler there, because this just gives us a G chord across all the strings. My ring finger there, just naturally, when you're playing these G chords and drop D tuning, this knuckle kind of wants to bend down, which is perfect, because then it just mutes the A string, and you can just play all the strings and not have to worry about that string. So rhythmic filler is really, as far as variation goes, I think one of the easiest sort of variations you can work into a piece. It's really just trying to pinpoint places where the melody notes are half notes, or in this case a whole note, so a really nice long note that's occupying all the space in the measure. We sound that note, and then we can just start to fill in the space. And the beauty, especially the more and more finger picking you do, is it starts to become really natural. You just have all these rhythms that are kind of built into your picking hand from practice, and you can start to just kind of sprinkle them in at will. You don't even really have to think too specifically about it. So although I'm breaking down, again, the strings that I have indicated in the tab, I also just recommend kind of let your hand do what it wants. And the beauty of this, again, is because you've got the chord down, you can hit any string. It's going to sound good. It's going to sound like part of the chord. So nice place, I think, to really dig deep into the potential for variation there. Okay, as you come to measure 13, this is going to be exactly the same as measure 5. But then we're going to make a little change at measure 14, add a little flair, which is to add a triplet into the melody here. So before we just did this, we just played 2 melody notes there. When we were in measure 6, we just played 1 and. But instead of starting with that middle finger down, let's leave it off so that we can do a little triplet there. So I'm taking that middle finger, I'm hammering. After I pinch string 6 and 1, I'm hammering into the 2nd fret, and then I'm pulling off. So just 1 pick attack, and then a little hammer pull with the middle finger. So that would give me 1 and in the rhythm. Now the rest of the measure after that, it's going to stay the same. So that would be measure 14. As we start measure 15, we're just going to repeat that same little triplet as the thumb drops down. Okay, now we come to our G chord, just like we did earlier when we were in measure 7. But we're going to apply the same idea here. So don't start with the index finger on that 3rd fret as we did before. Instead, just kind of have it ready. We're going to pinch string 6 and 2, hammer and pull off that 3rd fret with the index finger. So again, just one pick attack there as we pinch, and the rest of it's in your fretting hand. Then we're going to drop the thumb to finish that measure. And let's just bring that to measure 16, the first beat, coming back to that 2nd fret of G pinched with string 6 in the bass. Here's measure 13, 14, 15 into the first beat of measure 16. Okay, now as we're in measure 16, this is going to be another opportunity for some rhythmic filler. You can tell if you look back at that first A section, measure 4 and 8, they have that same dynamic where there's just one melody note on the first beat, and then we just play the bass the rest of the measure. So this time, let's go ahead, we'll fret that 3rd fret of the B string with our ring finger again, and we'll pretty much do the same sort of rhythmic motif that we did in measure 12. But this time what we're going to do is just change the order of the strings a little bit. So this time we'll play the pinch on 6 and 3. Then we'll play 4, 2, 6, 3, 4. And that's going to sound like this. So all of the same stuff I mentioned before applies, that you could do a whole lot of different sort of rhythmic fillers here. You could include that last note of your D chord. You could even leave that string open incorporate the open high E string in whatever rhythmic filler you decide to do. A lot of different possibilities. Let your ear and your preferences decide what the final choice is. Okay, so let's hear now the complete 2nd A section as we see it in the tab. Now as we come to the first B section, we're going to give this the same sort of treatment. We'll keep it nice and simple, straightforward on the first time through, and then we'll add some more embellishment on our 2nd trip through the tune and learn some possible ways to vary the B section. So as we start the B section, you're going to be up here on the 5th fret of the high E string, and similar to how we were operating kind of out of this D shape over here, now we're going to be operating out of this D shape, which is frets 5 of the high E, 7 of the B, and 7 of the G string. So that's going to be our basic framework. We're also going to be playing the 5th fret of the 2nd string. So you could think of it around this chord shape is great, and then you could also think of it as that little run of notes as well. So we're going to start on that 5th fret of high E. We're going to pinch that with string 6. We're going to go to fret the 7th fret of string 2 of the B string. We're going to pinch that with string 4. Then we're going to go to the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and we're going to pinch that with string 6. On the and of that, we're going to add the 7th fret of the G string. So that's going to give us 1, 2, 3, and 4 as the thumb comes down for that next bass note. Okay, then we're going to play the 5th fret of the B string again on the and of 4. That's kind of leading us into the next measure, which is going to start with a pinch of string 6 in the 7th fret of the B string, back to that 5th fret of the 2nd string. Thumb comes to the 4th string, 7th fret of G, 2 more thumb notes. Okay, now we can hear a nice little musical phrase there if we play measure 17 and 18, the first 2 measures of the B section. Measure 19 is almost identical to measure 17 if you just leave off the final note of measure 17. It'll give you measure 19. That's going to take us to G in measure 20, and that is just going to be exactly the same as what we did earlier in measure 4 of the A section. Measure 21 and 22 are almost identical to measure 17 and 18, just a little change at the end. So let's hear all of the similarity first. So nothing different all the way up to that fourth beat of the bass in measure 22. You can see there's a melody note in the and of 4. It's that 5th fret of the B string. And similar to what happened in the A section, we're just hearing a little melodic echo here. And that note is going to lead us into measure 23. So we play that on the and of 4. Okay, now as we come to measure 23, we're going to pinch string 6 and the 7th fret of the B string. We're going to go right back to that 5th fret note on the and of 1. Then our thumb drops down to play string 4. And then we come to our G chord again. This is pretty much identical to what happened in measure 7. We're just going to play the 5th and the 3rd fret of the B string, 5th fret of the 6th string, 3rd fret of the B string. Thumb drops down to play the 4th string in the bass. And then we come to the final measure of this first trip through the B section, and it's the same as the final measure of the first trip through the A section. Okay, let's just hear measures 23 and 24, those last two we did. I'll start on the final note of measure 22, actually. That's going to give us that. And now let's hear the entire first trip through the B section. So now as we come to the second B section, some of this will stay the same, some of it will change a little bit, and you'll notice as we do this that we're going to just use a lot of the same ideas that we use to embellish the A section. So this is another good example of how you can just kind of take ideas that work in one place and apply them to other places, and then of course you could kind of zoom this out and say the same thing about different songs, right? If you find certain ways of varying one song, it's probably going to work as a nice way to vary another song. We often think of improvisation in terms of, okay, it's my turn to take a solo, and for the next couple of minutes I'm going to be spontaneously creating melodies and sprinkling some harmony in there, and I'll never play it this way again. It's just totally spontaneous in the moment, and that's a wonderful way to improvise. I think many of us enjoy that. I know I do. Another way we could think of it too, though, is this idea of micro improvisation, where let's say we have a measure and we have 3 different ways we could play that measure. Well, each time through the tune we can choose which of those 3 ways we want to play it, and it doesn't always have to go 1, 2, 3. We can change that order each time through the tune. Then if you zoom that out further and you imagine that possibility with every single measure of the tune, now you have a huge amount of ways you can change the tune every time through. So we might play the first measure a certain way and then the second measure a certain way, but the next time through the tune maybe we play measure 1 the same way, but we change how we play measure 2. And again, you could apply this to all of the different measures, so you can see how there's just a huge amount of possibilities that could occur that way. Alright, so as we're coming into measure 25, which is the first measure of our second time through the B section, this is going to stay identical to what we did the first time through B, so we're just going to play what we did in measure 17. Okay, then here's our first idea that pops up again. Previously what we had done in measure 18 was we went like this to start off, but we're just going to add another little triplet here. So instead of playing 7 to 5, let's start on that 5th fret of the B string, and we're going to pinch that with string 6. We're going to hammer onto the 7th fret of B and then pull off to the 5th fret again. So we're basically going 5, 7, 5 on the B string there, little triplet. Okay, most of the rest of that measure stays the same, but then we're going to play a little extra melody note there at the end. Just keep that 7th fret of the G string down after you've played it on the and of 2, and you're going to play it on the and of 4 as well at the end of that measure. So now measure 25 and 26. come to measure 27. Measure 27 is taking an idea that we also applied quite a bit in our second time through the A section, which is we're going to take the second melody note of that measure and we're just going to slide it over into the and of 1. So rather than playing it on the second beat as we did earlier, we're going to play it on the and of the first beat. And let's start on that 7th fret note that we ended measure 26 on, that 7th fret there. That was the and of 4. That's just going to give us a little bit more of kind of a musical phrase we can hear. And that's how measure 27 will sound. So we're just again playing almost the same thing that we did in measure 19, except right there we just slid that note over. This stays the same. Okay, let's just compare that again, right? So measure 19 went like this. And measure 27 instead went like this. We're also adding in that little note there that kind of leads us in there, that 7th fret note. So that's another thing that we might consider as this sort of echoing a previous melody note to just kind of lead us into the next one. That can work really nicely as well. All right, now we're at measure 28. Measure 28, we're just going to use the exact same variation that we did when we got to this measure in the second A section, which would have been measure 12. So we're on that G chord again. Play just like we did before, although as I mentioned earlier, this could be a great place to do basically the same idea, but just change how many of those and slots you occupy with a rhythmic filler note, or change what string you do. Or another thing I didn't mention before is you could add a pinch in there, right? So instead of going 1, 2, and 3, and 4, we could also go say 1, 2, and 3, 4. We could add some pinches in there. So rather than just putting notes that are falling into that and slot, we could match them up with the bass note. A whole bunch of other rhythmic possibilities that could come out of that. All right, now as we come to measure 29 and measure 30, these stay almost identical to measures 25 and 26. We're going to use pretty much the same idea. That little triplet. Okay, only thing that changes is this final note is going to be the 5th fret of the B string, and that's going to lead us into another little triplet. We're going to pinch strings 6 and 2 and hammer and pull to the 7th and then back to the 5th fret. That's starting off measure 31. Thumb drops for our next bass note. Okay, now we shift over to G, and again we're going to apply this triplet idea. So rather than playing what we played in this measure the first time through, don't start with that 3rd fret down. Instead, leave the B string open so that you can hammer and pull that 3rd fret from the open B. Then drop your thumb. Okay, now we're at the final measure, measure 32, and we're going to again play what we played as the final measure of our second A section. We're going to fret that 2nd and 3rd fret and do that rhythmic filler that we did earlier on that D chord. All the stuff I just mentioned a few moments ago on that G chord measure you could apply here again. Change the strings, change the timing, maybe do some pinches that are in other places other than just that first one. Right? You could do some pinches elsewhere. You could do a little bit of everything. A lot of different possibilities there. So again, I think those rhythmic filler measures are maybe some of the easiest variations to experiment with at first. But some other ones that we saw, we again slid notes into the and slot. We added some triplets, basically just adding an extra note to an 8th note pair. And usually, I think actually in every single one of those cases, what we did was whatever the final note was. So for instance, let's say the one we just did, right? We did that G. Okay, the melody was 3rd fret, open B. And to make it a triplet, we took the final note, which was that open B, and we actually put it at the beginning. And then we added the 2 melody notes that we had already played. So that's a way you could conceptualize a triplet, for instance, right? Is you could say, okay, the melody was 3 open. I'm just going to make it open 3 open. And that turns it into a triplet, which I think I might have already said it, but you count those. For instance, this was on the 3rd beat of that measure, so we'd count it 3 and 4 as we come down to that bass note. All right, so that gives you this fun way of playing Angeline the Baker, and I think you can already see how there's so many different ways you could play this song. And as I've encouraged us to do in many of the other songs that I've taught on this channel, I love to just try to strive to play it a little bit differently every single time and constantly be changing how I play it. Certainly, the more you do it, the more you'll also kind of distill what some of your favorite ways of playing the song are. And that's great because then you can have that in your back pocket and you can always go to it. But it's fun to just wildly experiment sometimes as well. Get weird, get risky, try things that you're not totally sure if they'll work or not. And certainly when we're just at home practicing, it's a great time to do that. And then hopefully, if we get the chance to share it with someone else, to share it with a listener, at that point we've experimented a lot and we have some really interesting ways to deliver the tune. But I'll also say I love the idea, especially with these old-timey fiddle tunes, although, again, this could apply to so many things, is just find as well the simplest, the most nursery rhyme, simple way you could possibly deliver the melody. Because that gives you something you can build upon. And also, imagine it this way. You have the absolute fanciest possible way you could play it. And if you strip it down to that nursery rhyme simplicity, everything in between there is your variation. And so sometimes the best way to make something more complicated is actually to first just make it as simple as possible so that by the time you're adding that more complicated stuff in there, it's going to sound a lot more interesting if you've been keeping it pretty basic up to that point. All right, well, I hope you have fun with that. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you again soon with another song.